Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of the group chat on Two-Way, a platform whose ethos is peace, love, and understanding, and the presumption of grace for all. I'm Batya, and I am so proud to be joined by my four co-hosts for the group chat, Nina Turner, Emma Jo Morris, Robbie Suave, and Dan Turrentine. So I'm going to ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves, tell us something about you and your political background and the perspective you're bringing to the show. Let's start with you, Nina.
Well, I'm delighted to be here as well and with all of my colleagues. So I served in the Ohio legislature as a senator. I was on two presidential campaigns back to back with Senator Bernie Sanders, 2016, 2020. I am a progressive in the Democratic tier of things. I consider myself very much a hell-raising humanitarian. And something, Batya, that people might not necessarily know about me is I love to hula hoop. I'm very good at it.
I did not know that about you, Nina.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. Dan, tell us about yourself.
Sure. Dan Turrentine. I live in New York City. I represent the moderate wing of the Democratic Party. I was in DC for 20 years, working on campaigns in government as a chief of staff to a member of Congress and as a dreaded lobbyist for a decade. And now, as I say, New York City is home. Something you probably don't know. I love politics, love talking about it, love reading about it. But when I need a break, I love watching videos about men's tailoring and the different regions of the world, how they do it, and what makes each thing unique.
Amazing. We have here another very well-tailored person, Robbie Suave. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Batya. Really happy to be here. I'm Robbie Suave. I'm representing the libertarian and I guess perhaps the center-right perspective on this show. I work for Reason Magazine, and I also host a show called Rising for the publication The Hill. I actually have no interest whatsoever in men's fashion or fashion overall, and I dress myself based on other people's suggestions. My fun fact is my birth date is kind of funny. My birth date is 8/8/88. That's my fun fact.
Ooh.
Hilarious.
God, I feel old just hearing that.
That was really the purpose of the
Yes,
fun fact,
yes.
to make you feel old, Dan.
Thank you.
And Emma Jo Morris, tell us about yourself.
Hey, yeah, Emma Jo Morris. I'm senior consultant at Beck& Stone. I consult corporate clients about how to communicate with MAGA and right-wing media. So as you can probably guess, that's who I will be representing in this conversation. Hopefully, it's a lot of pressure. I spent 10 years before doing consulting in right-wing media. I worked at Fox News, the New York Post, Breitbart. I produced Hannity. Then I was deputy politics editor of the Post, where we broke the laptop from hell. Fun achievement. And then I went to Breitbart, where I started writing like sardonic first person essays that had weird themes and hopefully were thought provoking and definitely fun. So now I'm back in media with this show. I'm so excited. And a fun fact, which will explain what many of you must be wondering about why I talk like this. I am from Canada and I grew up there, moved here when I was 23. And yes, I'm a US citizen, for everybody clamoring to dunk on me.
Great. Well, in addition to the five of us, of course, the Two-Way community is here and you all can participate. This is what makes Two-Way so unique. So if you want to get involved in the conversation, if you hear something that you want to respond to, please raise your digital hand if you're here on Zoom and you want to engage. And as Mark says, please don't put smack in the chat. So our first topic today, we're talking about Elon Musk. So Elon Musk's time as first buddy has officially come to an end. He announced this via tweet, of course, or I guess you call it X now. Let's take a look at element one. And you can see here he is announcing that his time in the White House has come to an end. Now, he was heading up the Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE department, and he came in for a lot of criticism both from the left, but also from some of the members of the president's cabinet who accused him of being a bit of a bull in a china shop. He promised $1 trillion in cuts, delivered much less than that, for which he now seems to be blaming Republican lawmakers. So let's take a look at element two.
So, I was like disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly. Which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the DOGE team is doing.
I actually thought that when this big, beautiful bill came along. I mean, like, everything he's done on DOGE gets wiped out in the first year.
I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both. My personal opinion.
So let's discuss, was Elon Musk's time in the government, in the White House, a net positive or a net negative? Robbie, I want to start with you. Lay out the case for us as you see it, and then Nina, you jump in and let us know what you think.
Elon Musk did not fail us. We failed Elon Musk is how I would put it. And by we, I mean actually congressional Republicans. I mean, the fundamental problem is he did things that I would argue are popular. A majority of Americans in polls want to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. Obviously, we disagree on what parts of the government are wasteful, what things money should be spent on. It's a difficult task. He was identifying programs that I would argue majorities of Americans would want to make some cuts to. But the problem is nothing is permanent unless Congress acts. Congress needed to do rescission, needed to do legislation to keep those things permanent. There's no excuse for Republicans to take no action because they have more political power and capital right now than like they've ever had in my lifetime. And still they did nothing. Congress doesn't want to do its job. It's a major problem. And so while I'm glad he ended up identifying, I think like $150 billion worth of cuts that were made. Yes, the big, beautiful bill more than cancels out all of it. And it is sad. If there's any silver lining to this, I'm glad to have him back on projects I think are actually more worth his time, which is turning us into a multi-planetary species and building a Mars colony. That is, in the scheme of things, much more important than how much money government spends.
Well, he certainly has interests in about 70% of government agencies. So he did, he was there for himself. But President Trump didn't need Elon Musk. This was an epic fail. And that's why he's interviewing in the way that he is, because he knows that he has failed. Efficiency is one thing, but, efficiency is supposed to be about doing more with less. Declaring war on federal workers, like postal workers, workers who work in the Department of Education. Those are the kinds of synergies that Elon Musk put out into the ether, which I think does not do any of us any good. And how many people really do like Elon Musk? If you ask the average working class person, they do not really like him. So much so, I don't even think President Donald J. Trump likes him either, which is why he is gone.
Are you sure about that? I think they like each other, but go ahead.
I don't think so, Robbie.
I think they liked each other.
You know why I say that? Because you can't outshine President Donald J. Trump's personality does not allow for anybody to outshine him. And there was a moment there where Elon Musk was actually getting more press or just as much press as the president of the United States of America.
He let him in the Oval Office. He let the kid run around. They seem to get along better than, I hear you, but Trump shared the spotlight for longer than I ever expected.
That I will concede, but don't you think he used Elon Musk as a fall guy of sorts?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I think. I think that he was fine with Elon Musk getting all that press. It took some heat. It was finally somebody that the media wanted to scalp more than Trump, which was Elon Musk. I think that Trump has kind of a unique respect for Musk in a different way than maybe other people around him. And maybe Besant is actually also kind of in this category where Trump has a different respect for somebody who is uniquely and exceptionally successful. And that kind of puts them, I think, in different psychological ground in his brain for whether he's okay with them taking up oxygen and being around him and getting press, et cetera. But the thing about DOGE that, it's first of all, I think it was really effective in just elevating how stupid certain things are that we spend money on. And Nina, I don't necessarily disagree with you that it was kind of a shaky PR situation when we were seeing kind of working people in the government just getting fired with no kind of rhyme or reason. And it was very startling. And at first I didn't really have sympathy for that personally, because I'm I'm so frustrated with the size of government that it was hard to penetrate my cold, dark heart. But simultaneously, right, there was the USAID stuff, and that was being really elevated and finally bring into conversation the kinds of things that we were spending money on, like condoms in Mozambique was one that stuck out that I still remember. But it's sad because, Robbie touched on this. Congress isn't doing anything to accompany this work. And something that I'm noticing that I think DOGE is a great example of is Congress has basically checked out. It's basically like 200 people who are Fox News guests.
Yes.
They pass like one bill
Yes.
maybe like a year, and like it's presented like, couple days before they're gonna vote on it. Surprise. Seems like lobbyists have kind of written it for them, not really sure what they do for a living. And all that said, they've relinquished really their power, and it's gone, just been absorbed into the executive branch. But then what's the check on that is the judiciary. So it's basically the executive branch and the judiciary just constantly in a fight, and nothing ever gets done for real because Congress has just abdicated their role. And this is kind of crystallizing, I think, and coming more into focus. And DOGE was a really great example of that, where it's like, wait, government waste isn't supposed to be cut by the executive branch, actually. And for that matter, like, I guess we have OMB, but it's supposed to be Congress that does that. It's supposed to be Congress that reduces spending, and they've just completely backed off of that. No, like we don't really do that. We're just going to kind of like reprint the same bill that we've been printing for the last like 5 years or something, and that's it. And it's very disappointing. I think Elon Musk is descending into this kind of um, um, descending into this really dejected place and disillusioned place, because he's realizing, wait, like, no, I have no support, actually, no institutional support. The president has no institutional support because Congress is just not going to work.
Boy, I
Dan,
think Nina, cue the DCCC ads, because you you just made the Democrats' case a little bit there, which is awesome. Welcome to Team D. Look, I think he did do some good stuff, which is that he elevated he questioned the status quo. He elevated processes. Robbie, you mentioned like spending, stuff like that. Bill Clinton did that with Al Gore with reinventing government. Barack Obama did that to some extent. But where he, I think, kind of really made a mistake, and where DOGE kind of ultimately failed, is that they made it so political by putting out numbers that were just outright not true. They lied about some of this, saying it was all Democratic corruption and kickbacks, when it was congressionally appropriated funds from both parties, right? We may say you shouldn't send condoms to Mozambique, but the Foreign Relations Committee decided with the Health Committee that they wanted to do this. And so the reason Congress hasn't acted is they don't believe in it. Republicans in Congress do not believe in DOGE. I'd argue Donald Trump doesn't believe in DOGE, which is why he cut it loose. Poll numbers went south. See ya, Elon. So we'll go on. But I think a year and a half from now, DOGE will be like a footnote in his first 6 months.
question for Dan and Nina, and then we're going to bring in our first questioner. Have the Democrats ceded the idea of efficiency to the Republicans? Because I do agree with Emma Jo that this is something I think a lot of people feel frustrated by, is that Congress doesn't seem to be working. There does seem to be waste, even if Elon Musk really failed at doing a good job of rooting it out. What is the Democrats' response to that? Or is this not really something you guys talk about on the left?
No, I mean, Nina, I'm gonna be curious your thought. I think there is talk about not just DOGE, but we have become defenders of the status quo. Like, we want successful campaigns, successful candidates challenge and seek change, right? Things aren't going well. Congress isn't doing its job. Vote out, Emma, vote in Dan. Where, like, do some candidates for 2028, do some people running for governor in some states potentially talk about ways to reform to be more efficient? Nina, I don't know, what you think on that front, but I think we don't want to completely say we defend the status quo in an era when people don't like that.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. I mean, definitely both parties, I would argue, defend the status quo in some way. But for Democrats, as Batya asked, Democrats shouldn't concede the territory, but they shouldn't try to do it the way that President Trump ran as a populist. He said, you put me in and I'm gonna look out for working class people. Now that he's in, he's doing anything but. And again, to declare war on public workers. Now, you may say certain departments are too big. Well, let's have that conversation. But you don't say that postal workers are our enemies, or the people who work at the Department of Education are our enemies, or pick whatever department. Those are public servants. They have not been elected, but they are no less public servants. And they're our neighbors, they're our family, and they're our friends. So the way that President Trump is trying to get at so-called efficiency is wrong because it is pitting American against American, and that's not what he ran on.
I never
And
heard.
my final point on that, efficiency by definition, you're supposed to be doing more with less, not less and less. And the people who are getting shortchanged here are the American people. And I would argue that the American people are being seduced and being amped up into thinking that smaller government equals better service. Government is designed for us to do collectively what we cannot do as individuals. And he's in there running it, him and his vice president, Elon Musk, are running it as if it is a pure business, and it's not. So yes, Bacha, Democrats should be concerned about that, but I would hope that the Democratic Party would not do it in the same way that President Trump is doing it.
I am very excited to welcome in our first caller, Zach Alexander.
All right, Zach.
Welcome to the group chat. Where are you?
Hi, folks. I'm in Oakland, California. I guess this is my first time calling into this show, but I've called into the morning meeting a few times. And I'm really excited to be here. When I saw the lineup, I was like, this is going to be epic. I'm so excited. So thank you, everyone, for joining this panel.
Thank you so much
I'm
for
looking
being
forward to
here with
future
us.
shows.
Zach, when we get swag one day, you'll get some just as the first hand raiser, like, whatever, something's coming your way.
I'm so thrilled. I actually worried I hadn't signed up properly and I wouldn't get the Zoom link or something. So
Well, we're so happy to have you. What do you want to talk about?
there's a bunch of stuff on my mind. I'll try to focus it by saying, how do we get to real multi-party democracy in this country?
Mhm.
And the reason I have that question is like crazy with 300 million people, the idea that you could actually represent people's preferences in any kind of reasonable way. It's like, imagine you have two options for a restaurant and there's a 10-course meal and you're like, well, I like the zuppa toscana, but I also want whatever, so I just think it's crazy. And there's all these kinds of reasons why we have a two-party system, first past the post. But I just really want your thoughts, like 2025, what is stopping us and how could it change, or will it never change? And last thing I'll say before turning it back to you is I've been trying to understand American politics my whole life, but especially this past couple months, doing some more reading in social science and political science about it. One of the things I didn't fully appreciate is that voters basically follow parties. Like it's not so much that voters have their own convictions and then they pick parties and then they switch. They basically pick a party kind of as a social identity, usually when they're young, change it maybe once in their lifetime or 0 times. And then when a party says, we're gonna have this position now, the voters fall in line. Like there was one interesting study in Denmark where like the Liberal Party kind of switched its position on some stuff, and the voters just kind of was like, okay, we're doing this now. So that fact, plus the fact that we only have 2 parties, I think just leads to a lot of dysfunction in American politics.
Okay, pick 2 interlocutors from the panel that you want to respond.
Robbie and Nina.
Great.
Yeah, you picked probably the 2 most likely third-party voters of the lineup. In fact, I voted third party, I think, in every election of my life. I voted for the Libertarian Party. Yes, you nailed the problem is the system. I'm sure I'm not going to get any disagreement from Nina here. I support reforms to the system. I like ranked choice voting and other, I'm interested in all those things. I can't get myself excited about working toward, I have friends who work on those kinds of campaigns, that's what they've dedicated their lives to, and I just can't wake up every day and focus on that instead of policy. But I'm wildly in support of them, because you're right, our system is just way too, the way it funnels you to a 2-party system, I think cannot be overcome, frankly, via any social or political innovation. It would have to come with fundamental change to the system itself in terms of how voting works, which I wholeheartedly support. And if it's on the ballot, I vote for it. But until that day comes, I don't know what else to do but try to say people, no, there's more options out there. But for the reasons you mentioned, I agree with you completely. People are really stuck in a either or mentality, and it's not their fault. The system makes it where that's the most efficient use of your vote.
Oh my God. Amen. Robbie, Zach, I am about to leap out of my seat here. First of all, you said this lineup is epic. So I think we all should get some t-shirts that says
Yeah, I
epic.
like that. I like
Group
that.
chat epic. But no, absolutely. It is asinine to think that over 300 million people fit in two political categories. And having a duopoly only benefits the duopoly, which are private corporations that are in full control of how we vote in the United States of America. And voters are easily seduced. And so they treat these two political parties like sports teams. Either you're on team red or you're on team B. And depending on who's in the presidency and what the zeitgeist of the moment is, people don't tend to come out of those corners realizing or missing a larger point, which is working class people from all backgrounds. We have more in common than we do with the ultra wealthy. So we should be on team Medicare for all, team increase the minimum wage, things that strengthen the social contract. So Zach, oh my God, you hit the nail on the head. And yes, Robbie and I are all the way live, all the way get together on this. Come on through third parties. Let's do it.
Yeah, I got a little bit of a different take here because I actually think what's happened in the last decade shows that we're not locked in. Like Donald Trump has completely realigned, or it was already happening, but he accelerated it. He has a different coalition. The Republican Party's gone from a white collar to a blue collar. I think the Democratic Party has gone in the reverse. I think one of our problems, and Nina, you'll probably agree with me, is we have tried to suffocate any sort of real challenge and real dialogue. So Bernie Sanders, twice we kind of tried to, run off. RFK, we ran out of the party. And so I actually think the system is working in which if you have a theory of the case and you're willing to go out and make it, you can realign. Voters are a little more persuadable now. They're not as locked in. I think MAGA voters are locked into Trump right now, right? And there's a part of the Democratic Party that's anti-Trump. But I think it has not been a siloed conversation the last decade.
Yeah, Dan, I think that's really a salient point. I was thinking the same thing when Zach was asking his question. We just saw a party completely change its identity, which showed a lot more, nimbleness in the two-party system than I ever thought I would see. Thank you so much, Zach, for your question. Professor Kenny, welcome in.
There, I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that. Thank
Hi,
you.
tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are.
I'm in Clearwater, Florida right now, but I live in Brooklyn, New York also, so I go back and forth. I am a devotee to the morning meeting. Dan Turntine could
I can attest.
attest to that. Yeah, I wanted to bring up the Doge thing one more time. I think the real problem with the Republicans, with Trump and Doge, is messaging. It's just they're terrible at messaging. I mean, waste, fraud, and abuse is the simplest message to get across to anybody. But when you don't explain to the American people that Trump doesn't hold the purse strings to these issues and that, it's Congress that really controls that, and then you promise $2 trillion in cuts and which you can't live up to. It's terrible. And it's funny with Elon, when Elon sits in front of Joe Rogan or somebody, he's a pretty level-headed guy. He speaks pretty level-headed and he makes a lot of sense. But when you stick him out on the stage and he's running around with chainsaws and hats and acting like a jackass, it just takes from the message. And I think that's really what the problem with Doge was. I think waste, fraud, and abuse and exposing it is a good thing. But obviously, when the Congress kind of turns their back on and hopes it goes away, and then Trump is like, yeah, I guess it goes away, then what did we just do for the last 3 months or whatever? So
It's the difference between weed and ketamine, two
Yeah.
substances which he was consuming and different appearances, I think.
I
So
guess.
Emma Joe, you are an expert both on MAGA and on messaging. Do you think that the messaging around Doge was good? And if not, how would you have recommended they message about it better?
Well, that's the thing, is it wasn't, this Professor K, I think is 100% right. It's a really serious issue. It's probably an existential issue, I think, for this country, in terms of at least our ability to function as a superpower, the amount of debt that we have, the amount of spending that we do. And it was too loose. I 100% agree. It was way too loose. It was way too memey, and the like he would come out and say things before he was certain of what he was saying. He would come out and say things off the cuff without documentation in front of him. And granted, sometimes the media walked into traps on that where they would, I think it was also the condoms in Mozambique where they had said like, oh no, it's actually a teria. It's like, okay. But, for the most part, he wasn't serious enough. He wasn't tight enough in his messaging. He wasn't professional enough in his messaging.
Emma Jo, he being Trump or he being Musk?
Sorry, Musk.
Mhm.
And I think,
Oh.
no, but it allowed a distraction to form where Congress was able to kind of skirt away from the issue, because it became an unserious issue. It didn't rise to the level, I think, that it deserved of urgency because it was created into a meme. And it's a shame. It's something that I think that and I know the MAGA base it was part of what you voted for. It was absolutely part of what you voted for. It wasn't like a throwaway thing. It was like a main thing. And obviously it's Congress's role. And I think people are smart enough to know that. And I don't think that the blame goes specifically or only, I should say, on Musk and Trump and the White House and the administration, but I think Musk didn't do a ton to make sure that that issue was elevated and respected in the way that it really did deserve.
Professor K, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to move on to our next topic. I just want to make one point about Musk and Trump, and it's that there was a New York Times article that was came out last night, this morning, in which they said that the moment that the relationship between Trump and Musk started to shift was when President Trump read in the New York Times that Elon Musk was trying to attend a top secret meeting about our potential war plans with China. And Trump got very upset about that. And he used an expletive and said, "What the F is Elon doing there? He has business interests in China." And I think it was a really interesting moment in which it seemed like the president was very clear about the potential conflicts of interest and what could go wrong. And according to the New York Times, so take it with a grain of salt, this was the beginning of the sort of unraveling of the bromance between them. All right, next topic, foreign students in American universities. So Trump has been waging this war on Harvard and other universities over anti-Semitism. Last year, there were student encampments across the elite university system that resulted in Jewish students facing a lot of harassment on campus, and their administrators really failed to address them. Some universities are playing ball with the president, Columbia notably, but Harvard has really been digging in. And as a result, the Trump administration has been escalating. So they froze $3 billion in federal funding. They said they would revoke Harvard's tax-exempt status over its liberal bias. The government is also canceling $100 million in contracts. And most recently, they said they were going to ban Harvard's ability to enroll foreign students. Now, Harvard brought a lawsuit, and a federal judge in Boston on Thursday issued a preliminary injunction blocking Trump's ability to strip Harvard of its international students. And in response to that, I think Marco Rubio said they're going to focus specifically on Chinese students. In the 2023-2024 academic year, there were 280,000 Chinese students studying in the United States. Now, here is how the president of Harvard responded at the graduation. Let's take a look at SOT 5.
Of the class of 2025 from down the street, across the country, and around the world. Around the world, just as it should be.
So there's a lot to unpack here. There's the legal question, the political question, the moral question of Trump waging this war on Harvard and on foreign students. Should the US have so many foreign students at our elite universities? Dan, kick us off, and then Emma Jo, you jump in and respond.
Look, it's tough for a boy who grew up in New Haven to defend Harvard here a little bit, but I do think we should have foreign students in this country. I think it's a couple reasons. Like, we are an open and free society. It's one of the things that makes us great. A lot of these students end up staying here and starting businesses. I think 40% of Silicon Valley companies worth $1 billion or more were founded by immigrants who came to this country. I think to be in a classroom where you're hearing how people think from other parts of the world, building relationships. A lot of these students who go back to their countries hold favorable views of the United States. So I think it is good to be open and free, to allow these students to come in. It makes me nervous to start saying, I don't want the Chinese. Well, then what about, people from the Middle East? What if we get a future administration that says, I don't want Israeli students coming in here? I think we should be an open and free society. If you're shown to be a member of the Chinese intelligence, that's a very different story. But I think we should be open and free. And look, you want to cut Harvard's funding, you have a right to do that. They're not entitled to grant money. But I do think foreign students should be welcome here.
Emma.
Okay.
Drop the mic.
Yeah. Not all foreign students are the same, and not all countries are the same, and not all countries operate the same. And also, sometimes when somebody leaves a certain country based on the way that it operates, it doesn't mean that they've actually left, which is the case for China, which is why I don't understand how you make a comparison and really, I don't want to say that, but I don't think that there is a comparison to be made, or that you could say that it's really like a slippery slope, and I'll explain why. China takes its students and steals IP with them. That is the point of the CCP and why they want their students to be in American universities. And they will do all kinds of things to supplement those tuitions. They will do all kinds of things in order to get those students into those schools. And it's not in earnest, it's not in good faith. It's because the CCP is basically profiting and capitalizing off of our universities and our research and our funding of those universities. So if you can make the case that another country is doing that, and another country is extracting things out of our institutions because of their presence there, then maybe I would be open to that. But the Trump administration is zeroing in on the CCP because the CCP is a totalitarian country that's trying to displace us on the global stage. And they're doing that through asymmetrical warfare, which includes having their students in our universities and having those students coordinating with the CCP.
So you did, but Emma, do you think all 240,000 are spies? I mean, I'm being serious here, because there's no doubt they steal our IP and they're not good actors.
I know that it sounds crazy to have this conversation, but honestly, obviously, I don't know because I'm not in like books of spies. But I don't think that it's preposterous to think that. No, absolutely not. But just one second, we're talking about a government that literally breaks into every single foreign phone that enters their country. Yep. This is a government with massive capacity and massive surveillance capacity, massive capacity to have accountability for hundreds of thousands of individuals, millions of individuals, perhaps a billion individuals, perhaps. I don't think that it's so far out to imagine that actually, yes, every student is accountable to the CCP, every single one.
That would change my viewpoint then.
We were discussing immigration a few weeks ago and the incarceration or detention of immigrants. And you brought up this point that there are many, many Americans who have not had access to due process in a way that I hadn't thought about before, but think about a lot now. And I'm wondering, where do you come down on this? Do you feel that these foreign students getting all of these, support and the raucous applause from that Harvard audience, that there's something there that's coming at the expense of working class kids who could be given those spots? Or do you feel more that it's important for American students to be exposed to different nationalities and people from across the globe? Where do you come down on this?
About you, I think that more than one thing can be true at once.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this gets dicey. If there's some true security concerns, then let's have that conversation. But again, the way, it's not necessarily wrong for the Trump administration to approach this issue. What is wrong is to indict whole populations. I mean, there was a period of time in this country's history where you had the Chinese Exclusion Act, you know, in the late 1880s, a time where only certain immigrants were wanted in this country, and that's even including Europe. There were some Europeans, the Irish, you know, et cetera, not necessarily wanted compared to somebody that would come from somewhere in the north, in the northern part of Europe. So these strata that makes us America could easily devolve into discrimination against certain people just because of who they are in the world or where they come from. And I just don't like the broad brush. Now, your other point about what happens to American students, I can tell you at Case Western Reserve many years ago when I was on the Cleveland City Council, I did take a meeting with a group of African American students who had concerns that foreign students or international students, because I don't want to say the word foreign as if it's bad, but international students were getting more play and they were not. Now, this was several years ago. I was on the Cleveland City Council and I took their concerns to heart. And it wasn't that they were anti-international students, but what their concerns were, we're right here, we're homegrown, and we have to struggle harder than students coming from other countries. So we do have to take a look at that. But Batya, the president of the United States of America, his cabinet, they got a whole bunch of other stuff that, in my mind, they should be doing. The president ran on making the quality of life of working class Americans from all backgrounds better. But meanwhile, he's harassing and bullying places like Harvard or Columbia when that could be in the hands of somebody else to do. I just don't think his intentions are pure. And when I say pure, not that he has to be perfect, but again, stoking the flames of hatred just for the sake of hatred is never good. Now, charity should start at home and spread abroad. So you made a point that you wanted to see more American students get those slots. There's nothing wrong with that. We should have that conversation too, because you can't spread charity abroad when you are not taking care of the people who are right here.
Can I just respond to that really quick?
Yeah.
I just really
Not quickly, respond. Take your time.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm so sorry for talking. Yeah, like I just think like I don't think that I want to clarify, like I don't think that it's fair to say that Trump is stoking anything or that I mean, of course the country has the right to discriminate on nations entering our country. We do that all the time. You're not allowed to come into the country from North Korea. We discriminate against them. We discriminate against Iran and their ability to access our country. We discriminate against China and their ability to access our country on various things.
Well,
we do discriminate, and we have to discriminate. Of course we do. And not all countries are the same. The reasons why we're discriminating against them are obviously sincere. I don't think that it's fair to say that discrimination against China and allowing Chinese nationals access to our universities is discrimination based on anything sinister.
But I didn't say that. I didn't say the Chinese nationals. I think maybe we have a misunderstanding or some conflation here. I'm using the Chinese as an example because it's the example that we are lifting up.
Yeah.
But there has to be a recognition that racism and xenophobia and sexism and all the other isms is a part of the human dynamic. And all I am saying is that if this is a legitimate geopolitical or legitimate security concern, then let's have that conversation as a country. But when people pick out certain groups, even when the president called, COVID, the Chinese flu or whatever he said, that it may be true that it originated.
Let me.
I got you.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it's easier to stoke hatred. It's the humanitarian in me coming out, Emma Jo. I'm not saying for security reasons that certain people should not, but it is the way that the president is going about doing this. And I just happen to believe that his administration could be doing a lot more to lift and secure a social contract for the people in this country than going on this bullying, what I consider the bullying of these universities. And I'm not defending Harvard or Columbia by any stretch of the imagination, but I lean towards the humanitarian side.
I think it's very funny and ironic if Harvard is the one complaining that the Asians are being discriminated against. I mean, between Trump and Harvard, the entity that is guilty of anti-Asian discrimination is Harvard. It was proven in
Genius.
court that their admissions policies discriminated against Asian applicants in some of the most stereotypical and racist ways, describing Asian people as having inferior personalities. I think
That's what
that was-
started the affirmative action cases, was Asian
Robbie, that
students
is
coming
such
out.
a great point that nobody has made. I have a solution to the supposed discrimination. Just ban them all. Like, ban them all. Like, have only American citizens having these spots. Let's bring in Harold Alexis. Are you here, Harold? Can you unmute
There it
yourself?
is.
Yes.
Harold, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you? What you're doing and what you want to talk about.
Well, I'm in Long Island, New York right now. Just spending a little time before I head off to work. What I do full time is I'm a New York City police detective. But in my spare time, I do a lot of freelance paintings about some of the social issues going on around the country right now. The question I had regarding the foreign students coming to the university, I don't know if there's any possibility of if anyone can elaborate on this or if I'm just way off base with this, but I kind of wonder, is the reason why there's an emphasis on trying to prevent foreign students into the universities, is there possibly that there's a fear of the infiltration of like Marxist, Leninist, and socialist and communist ideologies, establishing a firm and complete foothold in the country as the reason for why there's an attempt to limit or completely outright prevent foreign students from entering the university systems here? Do you understand what the question?
Yeah. Emma Jo, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I definitely do agree. Like, I think that is something that is kind of current under this and under this thinking. Absolutely. We talked about this a bit last week when we crashed Mark's show. And I definitely think that that's the case. And I said that I think that when you're importing people who were raised in a different culture, who are raised with foreign ideology, you are bringing that culture and that ideology in with them. And that's just a matter of fact. I don't say that in a negative or positive way necessarily. And maybe there are some cultures that we would want to import, but the fact of the matter is a lot of the world, especially in the East, is leftist. They do come from left-wing cultures, and that is mainstream and that is ancient in some cases. And I definitely do think that the administration is thinking about that, and they are thinking about pumping the brakes on bringing in ideologies that are taking over these campuses and that do not fit or are not compatible with the United States.
Well, but I think though that
I take the opposite view. I visited a lot of college campuses when I wrote my book on student radicalism. I met with tons of student activists. They're very interesting and scary in some ways. I'm totally against the ideas you mentioned, Marxism, Leninism, etc. But maybe it's just my impression. I could be wrong. It seemed pretty homegrown to me. It seemed disproportionately white and affluent. It's not obvious to me that if you just go down it based on origin, the people coming in are more promoting of leftism or Marxism. I think it's people who are scions of descendants who came over on the Mayflower disproportionately, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it's elite whites.
I think it's both.
And this is a slippery slope. And again, we can use any group. And maybe, Harold, I'm a little more sensitive to this because I understand the struggle of being Black in America historically in this country. And when folks just label people just in the ways that are happening, and this is really the whole notion of the Red Scare is not new to the United States of America. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. Are we the type of society that is open to new ideas and vibrancy? Or are we the type of society where we're going to police and decide who is worthy to come into this country and who is not? Again, as I said, as a historian, there was a time where there were signs on windows in the United States of America that said Nina. And they wasn't talking about the great Nina Turner. It was no Irish need apply. Somebody, some system, some group made a judgment call that people of Irish descent, for whatever reason, were not worthy, picking and choosing who's worthy and who is not. So if we're going to have a measure, then let's measure everybody by that same measure. But to pick people just on their origin or what we think may be, or we don't want people with different ideas. You can't block different ideas.
Yeah,
Harold,
I
do you
think
want to let's get Harold responding to that.
I mean, I'm still trying to process it because I've been doing a lot of research on those topics, and it doesn't seem like those people. Well, I hate to refer to them as those people, but those ideologies just faded away. They just, for lack of a better term, they just infiltrated different institutions. So they didn't go anywhere. It's not like we prevented it or stopped them from coming, and it's not like they lost interest. They just used different methods, or they went to different institutions, and they surfaced with they surface the way of their if it's the schools, they surface the way of their students or whatever institution it is. But I don't think these ideas just dissolved or they just disappeared. They're still somewhere very well active. We just may not be recognizing it. You know what I mean? Because when I look at some of the demonstrations on the campuses, and then what I've heard is some of the demonstrators don't even know what they're demonstrating for. And I've also heard where there's research where a lot of these people are even paid protesters. And so where are they getting this funding from? So like I said before, my original point, they didn't just disappear. They went somewhere. And so is it possible that we're missing this? Because it's like I recall a lot of this was just dismissed. I think sometime like maybe back in the 1950s, some of this was just dismissed with like the HUAC, with the House Committee on Un-American Activity. So what actually happened with these people? They didn't just die off. Something happened with them and their ideas. Where are they?
Thank you so much, Harold. Go ahead, Dan.
I mean, I just think the challenge is what somebody says is unacceptable today, a different group could say tomorrow. And like JD Vance just went to Europe and said, you have to stop trying to shut the right out. You got to let the right into the national dialogue. Well, to the Germans, I'm paraphrasing, the right gets a little close to the Nazis, is what they would say. So we ban those parties. Well, this is what the case is in Germany, right? Certain parties are banned. And part of what is ascendant is certain Europeans said this anti-immigration push is reminiscent of it, right? I disagree with that. But it's hard to turn around now and say, we're not going to allow this group, we don't like how you think, and then go around the world and say, but let MAGA in. You can't have it both ways. We're an open, free country. Unless you're a jihadist who says, I want to take a building down, you should be welcome in our country. And we should, I think, celebrate diversity.
Thank you so much, Harold. Let's bring in Suzanne. I will say, I think that the worry with the Chinese students specifically is less what they are bringing here and more what they're taking here and bringing back
I get that.
to China. Suzanne, welcome in. Thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and what's on your mind.
Well, this will make all of you feel younger, so congratulations.
We love that.
I went to the University of Michigan on a swimming scholarship in...
I'm a fellow University of Michigan person. That's wonderful.
Well, this was before you were born, 1979.
Yes, it was.
So my question is regarding the trans issue. And this is really for Nina and Dan. Will the Democrats, and I'm going to say I have voted for every president, I voted Democrat for every president since Barack Obama, including Kamala Harris. So, I mean, I've got my bona fides there, but
you got street cred.
Yeah, but on the trans issue, I will probably never, unless, okay, I'll just say it.
Suzanne, can you define exactly what you mean by, do you mean trans people in women's sports and women's bathrooms? Can you just be specific about, okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I get really upset when Democrats say, they try to change the subject by saying, it's not a big issue, it doesn't apply to anybody. I think it applies to half the population who are women, because I think it's really insulting to women for trans individuals to say that they can become women by saying they're women or that they identify as a woman. And to me, it would be as insulting as me saying I could become a person of color by saying, I identify as a person of color. I find that highly offensive. And I find it highly offensive for Sarah McBride or Leah Thomas or Caitlyn Jenner to say that they want to be considered a woman. They're not. They're biological males who identify as women. And that's okay. They can identify as women all they want, but I don't believe they are entitled to women's sports or women's spaces. And it does make a huge difference in women's sports because there are more and more trans athletes who are taking up places on podiums and in lanes. And I find that very detrimental to women's athletics. So, I think this is an issue that really, it says, can you define what a woman is? Yeah, I know what a woman is. And it's not a man who thinks they're a woman.
So, Suzanne, first, let me thank you for the question and for the humanity with which you posed it. Very grateful to you for joining us. Nina and Dan, I would love to hear you both respond to that, and then we'll move on to our final topic. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
I just want to say, I hope that Democrats, my question basically is, will Democrats drop this issue so that we can, those of us who feel strongly about this, can vote for a Democrat again?
Thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah,
Nina.
thank you, Suzanne. It wouldn't matter to me who you voted for the record. I'm not one of them kind of politicians. I believe in democracy and that people should have the right to vote for whoever they want to vote for. On this issue, it is clear that Title IX was hard fought and that there are biological differences. It is how we treat the trans community that, again, the humanitarian in me comes out. So, I have 2 grandchildren and they're only 2 years apart, a boy and a girl. And it is obvious that my granddaughter is not physically stronger than my grandson. Obvious. So to make sure, though, that the trans community, Suzanne, this is my thing. So yeah, did Democrats go too far on this? Yeah, they did. And they were playing in our faces because it's not like, I don't believe that the Democratic Party in and of itself, they use the trans community, unfortunately, as a political football. That's how I feel about it. And I hate when they do that with identity politics. They don't use identity as a way to lift and point out some problems and challenges in our society. The Democratic Party, in my opinion, uses identity as a blunt force object. So that bothers me. Your point about the transgender community. Transgender people, especially Black transgender women, are murdered at some of the highest rates in the United States of America. So when I come at this, I'm coming at this as somebody that believes that we should love all humanity. Now, should we as a nation figure out, and I think this should be left to the to the sports commissions to set the rules and not necessarily, again, the federal government doing it. But if your question is, are women, women's sports and the impact that would have on Title IX, if somebody like a Mike Tyson all of a sudden says, I want to fight a woman because now I am a woman, then yes, that is absolutely a problem. And Democrats need to own it. And as a nation, we should not other our transgender sisters and brothers and family and friends. We should find a way in the arena of sports to make sure that they compete and everybody else can compete and that the competition is fair.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, look, a couple things. I think, one, the Democratic Party made such a mess of this issue and handled it so poorly. The first is we denied it was an issue, which, as you say, it is an issue. It's like when we said immigration at the southern border wasn't an issue. And here we're just, hundreds of thousands of people coming in and we're like, don't believe your lying eyes. The other thing is we froze. We didn't say anything, and now it's coming out. Kamala Harris had focus groups for a month to test messages and settled on nothing because we were afraid to offend parts of our own party, right? So nothing says leadership like, I pass. I think we need to be respectful and tolerant of the views that you hold. I think that most Americans don't have a problem with adults who choose to be trans, 25 and over, right? You want to do what you want to do in your private life, just like if you want to be hetero or homosexual, that is your choice. I think the idea of children being allowed to do things, the parents not being, made aware, schools encouraging it, and then young boys playing sports with girls. We have teenage boys. We have 3 teenagers, 1 almost a teenager. Their levels of puberty are wildly different. And when they've gone through it, they suddenly have muscles and armpit hair, and they are materially bigger and stronger than some of their classmates, let alone women or girls who are that age. So I think boys and girls sports, we should use common sense. It is not appropriate. It is dangerous to the young women. It is unfair to the young women. And so I think we should be respectful of that. And then I think most of the country would treat adults and say, let people be what they want to be and protect them.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. All right, we're going to move on to our last topic. It's a little bit more fun. We're going to start with a little bit of
talking politics is fun for some of us.
A little lighter, let's put it that way. Sam, can you play element 11?
What if we lost everything?
We're not going to lose everything.
No.
No. And if we did, honestly, I don't know if I'd want to live.
Why would you say that? What does that mean?
I just don't think at this age I'm meant to live an uncomfortable life.
What is this place? And why does everyone look like an Easter egg? Is this still their property? Michaela, she's my boss. I get to call her Kiki. It's a really special honor. Hey! Oh, shielding a scepter.
So, I hear you've made an enormous faux pas, and everyone's laughing up their sleeves about your date.
What? Why?
Why? Because she's brought a ludicrously capacious bag.
What?
What's even in there? Huh? Flat shoes for the subway? Her lunch pail? I mean, Greg, it's monstrous. It's gargantuan. You could take it camping. You could slide it across the floor after a bank job.
To a certain group of people in New York, status is everything.
I never feel guilty about being privileged.
New York City is my playground.
I run with a fabulous circle of people.
I like making my own money. I find that an aphrodisiac.
Okay, so basically, I noticed something recently, and it is that so much of the culture that's being produced recently, whether it's Succession or White Lotus or Sirens or The Perfect Couple or The Real Housewives, is about the very, very wealthy. And it led me to start thinking, who is this for? Is this a recession indicator to where middle-class people are craving narratives about the downfall of the very rich? Or is it actually produced for the very wealthy to give them permission to behave poorly because whatever they're doing, it's not as bad as the people in these shows? So, Dan, take us to start this conversation for us. Where do you come down on all of this culture that's being produced about fabulously wealthy people behaving badly?
So first off, show of hands here. How many people watch The Real Housewives? I got into $1 Million Listing, but I was never into the various housewives. Anybody? Ooh, okay.
I've watched a couple.
No one admits it.
I've watched some of it. I'm not a regular viewer. I've seen some of it.
Okay. Look, I think there's always been something about Americans that we have had this like kind of love affair with Hollywood, celebrities, and the rich and famous. I mean, even the show, The Rich and the Famous in the 1980s, Donald Trump was featured on it. Like Trump, played into this page 6 culture of like my sex. I think when he ran, if you recall, like in 16, he would puff up, right? Like his worth. He'd be like, I'm worth $10 billion. Like I'm worth $15 billion. Because Americans have always kind of looked up at the Roosevelts, the Kennedys. Like we've always had this love affair with like that like world out there. Maybe I can attain it. Don't ask me if it's not on ESPN or, cable news. I don't necessarily watch it, but they're popular. People love it.
Robbie.
love.
I think it's I like a lot of the shows you just showed. I love Succession. I love The White Lotus, and yeah, they skewer the elites. I mean, they're not. It's not aspirational. It's about how morally bankrupt and evil and abusive and drug addicted and infidelity and all the morally bad values. Of course, there's also television about lower class people.
I was going to say those aren't rich value. Those are like.
Well, no. That was my point. Is that I think it's helpful to remember that the elites are depraved and bad and horrible, and also the middle ground people and the low class people, everyone, human beings are depraved and evil and psychotic, and it transcends class lines. So the people are bad. I know this is what Batya thinks. I know.
This is what makes us great,
the
right?
people are bad and the elites are bad. That's the Robbie Suave take.
Okay, I want to bring in somebody who has a really unique perspective on this. Craig Scott, please join us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at, and a little bit, as much of your background as you want to share, and join the conversation. Let us know what you think about all of this culture that's produced about these wealthy people. Do we have Craig?
There he is. He's got to unmute. Nope, you're muted. Hold on. Does he have to be given permission to unmute? Let's see if we can. Nope.
Okay.
There we go.
It finally came up. Thank you very much. I'm presently in Greensboro, North Carolina. My background is very politically active, especially with regard to the Republican and conservative movement. The only reason why I have an opportunity to even speak to you guys today is because Donald Trump's First Step Act was released from federal prison after serving 26 years in federal prison in 2020. So
amazing.
I'm a Trump fan, so I'm gonna just put that out. And though this is supposed to be a light section, this thing about the evil rich people, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's being pushed now, because that's basically one of the main narratives that's being pushed about specifically Donald Trump. All of a sudden, to be a billionaire or to be a millionaire, automatically means you're just evil, non-humanitarian. You don't care about anybody but the rich. So that whole thing that's going on in the media, I just don't think it's a coincidence. I don't personally have any problem with aspiring to be rich. I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with, though, is the lack of political, legal, and regulatory environment that would allow people in the working class to actually get to that level. So if I have a question, my question would be, what are the things that we think need to be done, or specifically, what are the things that are being proposed in the Trump administration that will actually provide means for the working class to be able to become rich one day?
Emma.
Where do I begin? A huge, broad question that's definitely above my pay grade. I honestly think that is what the focus on immigration is. You have a massive, by millions, by tens of millions at least, influx of low-skilled labor entering the country. And I hope Nina agrees with me. I hope Nina agrees with this point. This is like OG Nina's party, really, making this point that there's too much unskilled labor. It is not fair. It brings wages down. It allows people to work under the table, aside from the fact that it allows an unlimited supply of workers. And I think that, first of all, I think it's hard to move up the socioeconomic ladder no matter what. And that's a fact. It's just, life is hard. Life is hard. And figuring out how to make a lot of money is a very complex challenge. But that said, it doesn't have to be this hard, especially for working class people. I think immigration is pretty much where it starts and ends. And that doesn't even get to, we're just talking about now labor, like supply of labor. We are not talking about the cost of housing. We are not talking about the cost of medical bills. We are not talking about the cost of school, of virtually everything that goes up when you have this massive influx of people. And listen, if we were having families of 10 and 15 children to American citizens, then maybe, I would have to walk this back. But these are not American citizens. And I think being a citizen in this country affords you, or should afford you, a certain promise of a lifestyle that's being really ripped away from you from people who are not entitled to that promise. Again, not for any reason other than their citizenship. Not for any reason other than their citizenship. I want that to be clear, please.
So, Nina, in 2015, Senator Bernard Sanders was asked if we should have open borders. And he said open borders is a Koch brothers proposal because it brings down the wages of working class people. And he said he doesn't believe in that, alluding to what Emma Jo just brought up, which is that this was the progressive position for a very long time, that having an open border is punitive on America's most vulnerable workers. Where do you come down on that?
Maybe for some, I don't think we can say the whole progressive movement felt that way. It would be one thing if, to deal with immigration in and of itself, many administrations and Congresses have failed. What are our rules, and are we going to stand by our rules? But I see this more broadly, which is it's not because of immigrants that the federal minimum wage is still $7.25. It's not because of immigrants that the hegemonic nation known as the United States of America does not have universal health care. It's not because of immigrants that almost 500,000 of our sisters and brothers and family and friends are unhoused. So to blame the lack of robust social contract on just immigration, I think is the wrong way to look at this. Craig, you asked, what is the Trump administration going to do? Well, President Donald J. Trump, with all his chutzpah, and I might not agree with most of what he says and does, but he has shown how to use power. This president should cancel all student debt, just like they canceled the PPP loans. Nobody had a problem with the PPP loans, but when it comes to working class people, you don't want to cancel the student debt. If President Donald J. Trump truly wants America to be great, he would support universal health care, helping unhoused people, basic universal income. Those are the kinds of things that would help lift this country and make it great. Putting the suffering of American working class people solely at the feet of immigration is a one-sided lens, and it is not the reason why 60% of the American people right now are saying that they are living from paycheck to paycheck. It is a structural problem, and these problems are not immutable. We can fix these problems. And FDR, although not perfect, New Deal, far from perfect, he was an ultra wealthy, he was in the ultra wealthy class, but he definitely had a heart for the people, him and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. So those are the kinds of things I think that we should be working on as a country to lift the American people. Emma Jo, to your point, I've said time and time again, I do believe that charity starts at home and spreads abroad.
Very quickly, I would
say quickly, super quick, Nina. I don't think that the MAGA base would disagree with most or anything actually of what you said in terms of the fact that, maybe there is a conversation to be had about helping people with healthcare costs, and maybe definitely there is a conversation to be had about homelessness and how we deal with that issue and how important both of them are. I definitely think that the populist right is very open to that and probably yearns for that conversation.
We should go on tour, Emma Jo.
Not unless and until we really should go on tour.
We should go on tour.
I'm dying to do that. I'm dying to do that. I want to go. But yes, and I think it would honestly be lit. But I think that conversation begins and ends with the border. It begins how do you have help with medical bills and housing when you have an open border?
Well, the open border is a problem. Yeah, I mean,
I never believed that we should have a.
Wait, let's get Robbie in, and then Craig, I want you to respond to what you heard, and then we'll let everybody go. Go ahead, Robbie.
I was just going to bring up a different couple issues that the Trump administration is working on and could work on even more. I think the simplest answer to your question is we need to get rid of credentialing everywhere we can, permitting and credentialing. That is something the administration wants to focus on. It impacts people searching for all kinds of jobs, the requirements to have college degrees or to have permitting and licensing. In D.C., where I live, Washington, D.C., for years, this is Democratic city councilors have been trying to require daycare workers, people who take care of small children. This is a job that You don't need a college education to do, frankly. My mother did it for 25 years. She did have a college education, but she didn't need the college education to do it. Your grandmothers can do this. Aunts can do this. The city council is trying to require these workers to have like sociology education degrees. This is insane. It's going to drive up the cost. It eliminates jobs, and it drives up the cost of getting childcare for workers in the city. It's totally needless. That kind of thing I should be fought, and the Trump administration has talked about doing more of that. But that's my very quick fix for how to create more economic opportunity for people.
Craig, do you want to respond to anything?
Sure. Thanks for everybody's view. My only issue with the traditional Democrat approach, universal health care and all that sort of stuff, is it sort of skirts over what I think is at the root of a lot of the problems as far as wealth building for people in the working class, especially in the Black American community. For me, it's family structure, traditional family values, traditional family organization. And I think the stats are pretty clear is that one of the clearest ways to grow wealth is through marriage and through family. And the Democrat Party has just not been good at promoting policies that are conducive to encouraging that type of structure. So that would be my only pushback to those approaches.
I think that's where, the Democratic Party, I mean, I'm not sure the government necessarily should be promoting, whether you should or should not get married. I think
they do things to discourage it.
Oh, of course.
So if they can do policies to discourage it, then they can do the reverse and encourage it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll just say quickly, we have to go. I actually think kind of the party, as we think about how to get back in the majority, I don't love the idea of handing stuff out to people. I think creating the environment where hard work incentivizes you to do better, and that you accomplish and you do and you build. And I know sometimes some help is needed to accomplish those things, but I hope the party will look to policies and ideas that promote opportunity. And I actually think Trump has done some pretty good things on that front. I'll actually give him some credit, but since we have to go, I won't list them.
Craig, thank you so much. I hope you come back often. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Emma Jo. Thank you, everybody who came. This was
We did it, Batya.
phenomenal first episode. Every question was incredible. It was such a joy and a pleasure and an honor to be here with the two-way community. God bless you all, and we will see you next week, Thursday at 4 p.m.